Lovely. And a very warm welcome to you today on behalf of AI Policy Labs to our podcast series on a very pertinent topic today, AI and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. My name is Mohammed Tawhid, policy intern here at AI Policy Labs. And just to give you a brief summary on who we are, AI Policy Labs is a global initiative which has been set up with a vision to explore emerging technologies and assess the impact of intelligent automation, digitalization, and artificial intelligence on policy making, implementation, and governance. Our primary focus is to explore the role of AI for public goods and AI for social good. And given the rise of automation and the uses of artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies, it became extremely important to ask ourselves, with only a decade left to achieve these 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, what role can AI play in achieving these? And will the new generation of technology take us closer or away from our global goals? And with the vision to build discussions on these important issues, we have launched a program on AI and SDGs, which will comprise a series of podcasts, webinars, research reports, expert opinions such as yourself, and articles to be published on our global channel in partnership with the Graduate Institute at Geneva, which will be published and is open for all. And as part of the program, this podcast series is being conducted with the aim to understand the potential of AI in meeting the SDGs, and concurrently the challenges that it may pose to stifle the same progress we are aiming to achieve. And the focus of today's podcast is SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. And given the vast experience of our guest today in the field, I think it's incredibly safe to say we're in good hands today. And just to introduce our wonderful expert, we have Professor Alex Pentland, who directs the MIT Connection Science, an MIT-wide initiative, and has previously helped create and direct the MIT Media Lab and the Media Lab Asia in India. He's one of the most cited computational scientists in the world, and Forbes recently declared him one of the 7 most powerful data scientists in the world, along with Google founders and the CTO of the United States. He's on the board of the UN Foundation's Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data and has co-led the World Economic Forum discussion in Davos that led to the EU privacy regulation GDPR and was central in forging the transparency and accountability mechanisms in the UN SDGs. He's received numerous awards and prizes, such as the McKinsey Award from Harvard Business Review, the 40th anniversary of the Internet from DARPA, and the Brandeis Award for his work in privacy. So once again, I think there can be no questions on the quality of the expertise that we're fortunate enough to have today. So thank you.
Thank you.
And let's get right into it. In your view, how can AI help in meeting the SDGs, particularly in achieving decent work and economic growth for all? And if possible, could you pick a few examples to showcase which sectors will have the maximum potential for growth with AI?
Yeah, I think that AI, first of all, AI is just patterns and data. It's not, there's just like all this mystique and hype around it. It's really just patterns and data. And so a lot of the focus needs to be on what data, is it sampled with bias? Is it the stuff that you need to do things? And when you begin to look at AI and data that way, you say, well, what are some of the things that we would like to do? Well, we'd like to manage our croplands. We'd like to have transportation work. We'd like to have our healthcare system work. And all of those are things that are really important for all of the SDGs. And there are great examples. I mean, the thing is when something really works, we forget about it. So for instance, weather reports. Weather reports used to be completely useless. And now they can tell you, oh, 10 days from now, this storm in the Pacific will get to, and they're right. And that's the result of 10 of the biggest AIs with 10 of the biggest real-time data sets in the world, all doing simulations. And then they report it back to you in a way that the average person understands. That's a great example. You see the same thing in land use, sort of satellite data, which I used to work on years ago, to sort of figure out where there's erosion, global warming, any of those sorts of things. In transportation, there's an enormous amount of planning that goes in to construct infrastructure and roads. And of course, recently we've seen health. The development of the vaccines was not some big program. It was lots of people working in a sort of distributed AI way. AI was very key to it. And people forget. It's a bit of a miracle that such a thing even exists, and it isn't another 9 years in the future. So those are all examples. And of course, they all have interesting ramifications for employment, for workers. They're all things that involve workers. So for instance, in the pandemic, you know, distribution channels ranging from Amazon to home delivery to et cetera, all tripled, quadrupled their employment. And these are generally pretty good jobs, the things like Amazon and so forth. And I think that the gig economy type things will get better as regulation happens. So I think those are all good examples. The thing that's concerning to people is that you can't quite see what the examples will be until you get there. And you know, there is this sort of tendency for people to apply technology to reduce costs or increase productivity. And the sort of initial thing is well, so what happens to the people? And we do need to pay attention to that, obviously. But at least so far, it hasn't been too bad. The main thing that you need to do to make sure that this continues in the right direction is you need to do education and training and regulation to support people in good jobs in the face of this. And this is not new. This is what we did when factories first became possible in England and the US, and they were, you know, spinning cloth and so forth. It took quite a while to develop the right regulations and things, but they did eventually. Same thing as electricity came in. That was a major change in many things. Generally for the good, because it used to be that, you know, cities were filled with horse manure, and we were cutting down the forest at amazing rates. And we moved to coal, which is not so great, but it's better than the other two. And hopefully we're going to move to lower and lower carbon things as time goes on. So it's frustrating because it's slow. We don't quite ever keep up with it. But I think there's good reason to be optimistic and hold on.
I really like what you touched on, sort of the multilateral approach of AI and the way it influences many different areas of the potential economy.
It's a way, I mean, you know, again, this is not new. In the 1800s, right, early 1800s, they started collecting statistics about populations, the census. And that was social physics. They were trying to figure out where do people live, where are the pockets of poverty, where was what sort of made, because people just didn't know. And as you got more information about the character of the country and the society, you could make regulation that worked better. And that's really what we're talking about here. And it involves changing rules, which means it'll be uncomfortable. And we need to do it quickly, which is rather novel because the technology advances very quickly, but also recognize that it needs to advance quickly because the challenges are now quicker than before.
I mean, it comes back to this idea of careful governance, which is a theme that's really cropped up in a lot of the AI public policy literature or general AI literature from computational scientists. And you often hear AI and the rise of AI be referred to as the fourth industrial revolution, with the one key difference being that we are at a position in a great period of time to correctly govern. I was wondering if you agree with that statement, if whether or not we are actually in this position to correctly govern and correctly manage what possibly could be the future. Sorry, well, I know these are big questions.
I think that we are. There are, of course, problems. But the core thing is that each time you see this, what's happened in the world is there's a new means of production. So it used to just be land and physical labor, and then you got machines, and so labor took on a very different meaning. It was operators of machines. And banks arose, local banks, not just the central bank. And so we had to adjust our social governance to have labor unions, labor laws, banking laws, local things that protected the individuals. And now data is the next means of production. And I think that's the right way to think about it. It is a fundamental part of production now. of everything, of government, of industry, of health. And we need rules for governing it. And so that means we need probably new institutions, we need new ways to think about it. We don't quite know how to think about it yet. And this is how I got involved in the discussion at Davos that led to GDPR, is that, I thought people weren't thinking about data and what it meant to all the stakeholders. And then more recently, we've been advocating, and we see quite a bit of movement at having institutions that represent people, because data is complicated, just like money is complicated. And in different countries you call it slightly different things: cooperatives, data cooperatives that represent you in your neighborhood, trusts that help you make decisions about data and leverage your data. But it's that growth of institutions, the same way we saw with labor, the same way we saw with capital, that is beginning to happen. And the good thing is people realize that this is necessary, and it appears that there's sort of the next layer of solution is already being tested and discussed and so forth. So it's not as fast as people want. People are very impatient these days. But it's a lot faster than it was with banking or labor. So maybe we've gotten a little bit ahead of there.
I think there is hope. Just to move forward once again with another big question, it is believed that there is a high likelihood of increasing inequality between nations with the rise of AI. And in your view, what is the best way to develop and share AI across borders to ensure that the less developed countries are not left behind in an economic shift, thereby possibly widening the economic divide?
Well, typically what happens in these things is a mixture of things. And I won't claim that it's great, but like take tax policy or take trade. So what happens is there gets to be knowledge about what to do. People are educated. Regulations are put in place in every country. And then you have software or hardware that you need to install to actually make it happen and make it happen correctly. And often that's built by companies like IBM or Microsoft, or now some of the Chinese companies. And you might consider that sort of a threat to sovereignty, and you'd be right. But it's very difficult in terms of investment and expertise and training to develop your own. Plus, you really want tax systems to be interoperable. And trade needs to be interoperable. That's what it's all about. And so what I expect to see and we already are seeing this, is new sorts of platforms that help countries and citizens with payments, with taxes, with trade. And they're built by some of these large companies, but in the end, they're sponsored by countries. Mm-hmm. And what that's doing is bringing the tools of AI to bear in ways that aren't actually terribly visible often. It's like when you get approval for a loan or use a credit card or do something outside the country, travel or something. There's all these systems in the back that verify and make sure you're not a criminal, etc. Those are, you could think of them as very simple versions of AI, and they'll get better. Of course, that brings up the question of privacy and sovereignty and bias and fairness. And one of the things we've sort of lagged in as a species is keeping track of this stuff. It's not surprising. When labor first became a thing in England in the 1850s and America shortly after, it was horrible. The factories, the society abused these poor people. And it took a while to actually build the fire breaks in there. And if you think about capital data the way you think about money, the way you think about labor, it's really clear that you need those sort of protective layers in there. It's not, a crazy new thing. This is just parallel to what we've always had to do. And the solutions will be parallel also to the way we handle money. When you put money in a bank, you expect to get it back, and the government guarantees that you will. Okay. When you have data and you want to help that uh, to get better health services, for instance, there should be an institution that helps you interact with the hospital, and the government should audit them. It's the same type of a thing, and
Mm.
we're perhaps a little slow in off the mark in creating these things, but then we didn't realize that data and AI were going to be such an important thing as in the way society was. Now, as we realize it, it becomes clear that you need these institutions.
Well, thank you. I think it's an incredibly important perspective to have on the matters. Not quite as polarizing as some of the other literature. And just to expand upon this, will AI increase job prospects or reduce them worldwide? And is it possible to upskill enough people and at the rate required to fill the high-skilled jobs which AI will create? And if so, what is the best way to achieve this?
Well, I think that this is part of the hype of AI. High skilled jobs. Well, yeah, there'll be some of those. But actually, making, like we did a big program in Canada. What we were trying to do is train plumbers and builders and plumbing supply people, etc., to use AI, but not fancy AI, right? And part of it is they don't have the sort of data on that. But what they realized is using very simple techniques that look a lot like just Excel spreadsheets, right? And the data they already had, they could be much more efficient. They could deliver things the right way at the right time instead of having all this sort of chaos that you see in the current sort of construction industry. And that actually is the body of what AI will do. It's making things work more efficiently, more precisely. And it has the interesting characteristic that you can now audit things. When it was just people talking to each other and, maybe the sink showed up or maybe it didn't, you could never really prove what went wrong if the sink didn't show up or it was the wrong sink. But because this is data, you can go back and say, oh, this guy screwed up right there. And so it brings potentially a much higher level of transparency and auditability to all of the things that we have to do. We have to grow food, we have to build houses, we have to have health systems. An example is one of the spin-offs from my lab is a little company called Damagi, which uses mobile phones to deliver healthcare devices. So it's a type of simple AI. And the mark of success is it actually delivers healthcare services to 10% of the human race. Well, that's pretty good. Okay.
Yeah, that's very
And
impressive.
it was a major factor in reduction of child mortality and things. It's just a little company. But the thing is once you go digital, you have data, you have the right governance, because these are done through health ministries. So they come with the governance already built in. Then you can begin making things work. And I think that's a lesson from the current pandemic, is that there were a lot of things that weren't working, and we sort of didn't realize it. Now, in the future, hopefully we can make things much more accountable, which means you have data about them.
Wow. There's a lot of interesting knowledge there to unpack, but I really like sort of this idea of everything being brought to the forefront. It seems as though AI plays what perhaps a layman, even such as myself, may perceive as a background role, crunching the data, processing the information, but instead it will slowly perhaps become more prevalent and more obvious in modern life.
Yeah, one of the things that I like to point out to people is that almost 80% of the human race uses AI all the time. And it's called a mobile telephone, okay? And what the mobile telephone has in it are things like maps, so you can sort of plot where you're going. That's a type of AI. They often have speech recognition or language translation these days. That's a grand challenge sort of AI. They didn't have that in the TV series Star Trek, right? It was just amazing, right? And there are other things built in there. The fact that it works at all is crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
Millions of towers, you walk around, you drive around, you don't even notice that it's switching you from one tower to the other and getting it to the other
So
country.
seamlessly.
It's amazing. Okay. That's AI in action. Okay. And it's done reasonably correctly where it's auditable and you can tell what's happening. And part of that is that it's so ubiquitous and so customer facing that they have to actually make it work pretty well because otherwise people wouldn't use it. But those are examples of what AI ought to look like. Weather reports are examples of what AI ought to look like. You understand it, right? When you say, how do I get from here to there? And Google shows you a way. Oh yeah, streets, and it's like trying to try a bunch of different streets to sort of find the best path. That's what it does. Yeah, that's exactly what it does. It's AI. It's the same AI that people used in the original chess programs, which was, taking over, human race,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. But you use it every day.
Mm.
It's not magic. And I think that part of the problem is that it's in the interest of some of the researchers and so forth to hype AI, obviously, right? So I have a endowed chair at MIT that was originally given to Marvin Minsky, who named AI
Oh,
back in the
God.
50s,
God.
right? And he chose the words AI
Mm.
because it was scary, right? Not necessarily what you want at all, but it's scary and it got people's attention and it sort of made the field. But you don't actually want artificially intelligent items. That's stupid. Why would you want that? What you want is smarter humans. And so if you think, so we try to often describe this as extended intelligence or augmented
Interesting.
intelligence. So that's what that map is doing on your phone. Is it's helping you plan. That's what the
Mm.
weather report is doing. It's helping you know what to do and what's coming. Helps you plan, right? Those sorts of things are not scary at all because you can ignore them. If they're any good, you have some understanding of what's going on in there.
Mm.
You need to make sure that they're not biased and sneaky in some way because they certainly can be, just like humans can be, right? But now you have the data to be able to tell if they're being, whether they're behaving themselves or not. Whereas with humans, you don't have the data.
Wow, fascinating. Again, that was really, really interesting. Just for one final question, if we've got the time. In your experience as a founder for advisory boards for various firms, did you see any concerns or challenges in respect to emerging technologies such as AI? And could you share how firms have been approaching AI and other emerging technologies?
Well, in big companies in particular, sort of telcos, Google, things like that, they're extremely concerned about safety and privacy in data. So it's interesting. You don't hear about data breaches from some of these big companies because they're so concerned about it. And I helped AT&T put in together places just sort of like layers and layers of protections against
Wow.
misuse of personal
Mm.
data, delivering things that weren't conforming to permissions, et cetera, et cetera. And AI is just optimizing over that, right? Okay, so they're concerned about the data. The things that they are concerned with are, of course, legal liability, but also brand risk. So they
Mm.
really want their customers to like them. That's how they make money. Okay, so almost every company I talk to, and I talk to the senior leadership, they're very concerned about the question of how do I get permission to use data, and in some ways it's very simple. It's not about these long legal contracts. That's just stupid lawyer stuff. What it has to be is something that's very simple, where you say, "We're going to do this, okay?" And if you don't like it, you still get the service. I mean, where possible. Um, so it's this. Does the person on the street understand what's happening to their data? That's what it means that they have to go to, and they're struggling with that. And I think the reason they're struggling is because they don't have this concept yet of having data banks the way we have money banks. Instead of credit unions, it's data unions. And as we get those institutions that help us make decisions about data, they don't own our data. Banks don't own your money. They help you use your money, right? So credit unions, data unions wouldn't own your data. They would help you use it in a safe way. As we get the development of those institutions, then we'll see things get much more the way you would like them to be. Let's just say, right?
Lovely. I think we're approaching the 30-minute mark, so it may be best to leave it there, I'm afraid. But that was fascinating. Yeah, I mean, your insights are incredible. Really interesting. Thank you.
Well, glad to help. Glad it was interesting. Take care.
And you too. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Take care.